Let's take a look at Bloom's taxonomy. Before we can address how people learn, it's important to establish exactly what people learn. In essence, as people engage in the learning process, what are the typical objectives or outcomes of learning? Benjamin Bloom, along with colleagues, developed a taxonomy of learning objectives that is used in education but also applies in training and development. Bloom's taxonomy has three main learning domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The cognitive domain involves knowledge and comprehension of facts and concepts. At the lowest level, this involves information that is memorized. As the cognitive domain increases, learners must understand, apply, and extrapolate to other situations. The affective domain involves how individuals relate emotionally to knowledge, specifically how they gain feelings, values, and attitudes about a given topic. When learners are able to effectively and emotionally engage with the material they are learning, the likelihood that they will learn and utilize the information increases. The psychomotor domain depicts the ability to physically utilize an object, such as a tool. Similar to the cognitive domain, the psychomotor domain moves the learner from basic sensory cues for how to use a new tool to adapting and extrapolating use of the tool in a new context. While the original focus of Bloom's taxonomy was directed towards primary and secondary education, understanding the taxonomy has applications for workplace training as well. It isn't enough just to memorize new information to perform a job. Employees are expected to both understand and apply the workplace situations of the KSAs that they learn. Effective training and development programs ensure trainees are provided with the knowledge they need to do the job, but also the skills needed to apply that knowledge to achieve high levels of performance. Bloom's taxonomy, however, provides trainers with a good checklist of domains to consider when designing training programs. Bloom's taxonomy was developed for teachers and trainers, not for trainees, so it provides a guideline for creating the learning objectives to design the training itself. Trainees need to know what they will be learning, but not necessarily in the form of structured training objective. While there are many theories of how people learn, a subset of those theories is relevant to training and development in organizations. Behavioralism focuses on the observable behavior as evidence of learning, while cognitivism says that the learner should be viewed as an information processor like a computer. Constructivism argues that learning is an active, constructive process. Lastly, humanism sees the learning as a personal act and is instrumental in fulfilling one's potential. Understanding how each theory contributes to the way people learn can provide us with guidance for how to best develop training programs for employees. Within the behavioralist theories of learning, we find three relevant theories: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and social learning theories. The most famous researchers associated with classical conditioning are Pavlov and Watson. Classical conditioning, considered a building block for how people learn, is based on so-called associative learning. Operant conditioning is the basis for reinforcement theories of motivation and helps individuals make the association between a particular behavior and a consequence. Reinforcement theories explain why employers ensure newly learned desirable behaviors introduced in training programs, such as new work processes or a new computer program, are rewarded. Cognitism differs from behavioralism because it suggests that people are more than just programmed to respond to stimuli. People must be active participants in their learning process. Cognitive load is the total amount of mental effort being used in working memory. When designing training programs, cognitive load should be reduced to maximize learning. Learning occurs through the process of memory encoding and retrieval, according to information processing theory. Information processing generally includes sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Both sensory memory and short-term memory have limited capacity. However, long-term memory has no known limits. Information is gathered, processed, and sorted through the senses and through short-term memory. If information is deemed relevant and necessary, it is encoded into long-term memory and organized to facilitate retrieval when necessary. According to constructivism, learning is a constructive process that is active, not passive. High-order cognitive processes are utilized to develop interpretations and construct knowledge of the learning process. In active learning theory, learners or trainees control their own learning. The trainee assumes primary responsibility for learning decisions, and thus there's an internal regulation of learning. Organizational learning theory argues that organization members construct their own knowledge through a community of practice in the organization. A community of practice occurs when individuals share a domain of interest, interact with each other within a defined community, and have a shared repertoire or practice of stories or experiences. The last category of learning theories we address is the humanism approach. It suggests that learning occurs as a personal act to fulfill one's potential. Experiential learning theory argues learning is a process done through experience. Given experiential learning requires self-initiative, it fits in perfectly with the humanistic approach. In the workplace, when an employee is ready, willing, and able to learn something new, experiential learning is an appropriate tool that empowers employees to learn new material in a fun and engaging way. This means there's a greater likelihood of trainees internalizing and mastering the new material with greater intrinsic reward. A great deal of attention is paid to pedagogy, or the study of education and how to best teach. While some theories of pedagogy may spill over into training and development, of greater importance to organizations and training and development professionals is andragogy, or the theory and practice of educating adults. While pedagogy argues learners depend on the instructor for directing them on what to learn, andragogy suggests that adults are self-directed but guided by instructors. Adult learners are instrumental in their own learning process. They're more proactive in doing the work needed to facilitate learning, and they drive the learning process based on what they believe they need to succeed in the job. Lastly, under pedagogy, teachers assess whether or not students learn what they are expected to. Adult learners engage in self-evaluation, committing to work continuously until they master what they need to learn. The workplace includes primarily adults, so adult learning must be at the center of training and development activities. Adult learners are driven by intrinsic motivators to achieve autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and are more likely to be active participants rather than passive participants in learning. So here are some assumptions. Adults need to know the reason for learning. Experience provides the basis for learning. Adults are interested in immediate relevance. Adult learning is problem-centered, and adults respond better to internal motivators. A relatively new idea, heutagogy, is the study of self-determined learning whereby learners drive their own learning. Heutagogy goes beyond andragogy and the assumption that learning will encompass development of both learner competency and learner capability. Technical advances have created opportunities for different ways of learning that are self-determined by the learner to understand, create, and apply knowledge and skill. In short, teaching people how to be lifelong learners rather than limiting learning needs to be the teacher or organization's perspective, and that's the goal of heutagogy. Learning entails not only addressing how to solve an existing problem, but also adapting beliefs and actions to the learning experience. Self-reflection enables the learner to apply competencies to solve both familiar and unfamiliar problems. Self-determined and self-directed learning should not be limited to exempt employees and those who exhibit high potential for advancement. There's a lot of talk in the training and development industry about the importance of considering individual learning styles when designing training programs. Many theories have tried to explain how learning styles affect learning outcomes, so many training specialists find it imperative to identify trainees' learning styles to best match the training method to the trainee. Given much of the evidence that measures learning styles or research methods using those measures are flawed, what should trainers conclude about the need to consider learning styles? One conclusion is that even though researchers haven't found a definitive measure of learning styles, the way people take in information and learn is still an important training design consideration. What current researchers on the topic recommend is a balanced approach to instructional design. The match between content and the instructional method used to effectively teach the content may be more important than learning styles. Although we are in a unique place in history where multiple generations actively participate in the working population, it's still under debate whether there are meaningful differences in the way each generation learns. While millennials tend to be more familiar with learning online, older generations are not necessarily uncomfortable with technology, nor does it mean that older generations learn differently. There is little evidence that generations learn differently or have a preferred learning style. What we do know is that each generation's values and experiences are shaped by the events that occur during their lifetime. These events had an impact not only on the lenses individuals use to make sense of their world, but also on their views about work, career goals, and learning. It's important to note that despite some key differences between generations, not every person in a certain generation shares the same values or thinks or learns similarly. The individual differences between generations will impact how they approach learning and training and development.